because of various factors. ये question UPSC ने पूछा भी था, not in the GS paper but in history officer, that Napoleon was the child of French Revolution. Why? Because his rise was only possible because of revolutionary appeal. Because he was born in a humble origin. He was not born in a strong aristocratic family. और उस समय आर्मी की जो top positions थी, वो उन्हीं लोगों को मिलती थी who had good connections with the noble family. Being from a humble origin, that too not of French ethnicity, it's very it would have been impossible for the Napoleon to rise if it would have not been French Revolution. Similarly, he also reflected embodiment of revolutionary principles, especially in the first 5 years of his rule, where he upheld many revolutionary laws like equality before law, secularism, right, abolition of feudal privileges. All these ideas were promoted by him. Thirdly, the Napoleonic Code that he had introduced, it was the first legal document that was promoting various ideas of French Revolution like civil rights, like equality before law, etc. Similarly, he also, through his rule, he expanded the French Empire to various parts of Italy and Germany. और जब वो वहाँ गया, so he just not rule there, he also spread those Enlightenment ideas in those countries. Plus, because of his rule, nationalism feeling also emerged in those countries. ठीक है? Now, he was also called as the destroyer of revolution. This question can also be asked in the main exam. Why? Because while crowning himself as monarch, he destructed the idea of republicanism. Because ultimately French Revolution was all about that there should be no absolute monarchy. But in 1804, he transformed himself into an absolute monarch. Right? Similarly, he also restored authoritarian rule. He actually, suppressed opposition parties, he suppressed press, he suppressed, political clubs. So that was the idea that was promoted by the revolution. He suppressed that. Thirdly, he also subordinated the legislature and the constitution. He became somebody who can be called as the absolute monarch. Legislature has no real power, transformed into rubber stamp. So the popular sovereignty का concept था, kind of he weakened that. And finally, he led to militarization of the revolution. पूरे revolution का एक ही मकसद आ गया, permanent warfare and more conquest. And ultimately, by ruling over other countries, he violated the ideals of French Revolution, which include the idea of equality, liberty, and fraternity. So with this, we have come to the end of Napoleon. After the break, we will start with Vienna Congress and Italian and German unification. So we'll take a break of 5-10 minutes and then we'll start. the grandson of Okay, great. So ultimately, after the defeat of Napoleon, what happened was कि भाई अब हुआ गया कि अब फ्रांस में नेपोलियन हार गया है. अब क्या किया जाए? तो यूरोप के जो राजा थे, डिप्लोमेट्स थे, they sat in a congress, what we call as the Congress of Vienna, 1815, and then they decided कि भाई अब now that because Napoleon had shaped Europe in his small tenure of what 14 years, 13 years, he had redrawn the boundaries of Europe. Whole Europe except few countries were under his influence. So now that Napoleon is defeated, they had to redraw the map of Europe again. And that's why the high and the mighty people, they sat in Vienna. All European states, in fact, sat except Turkey. And it was headed by the Chancellor of Austria called as Metternich. Metternich was a firm believer on the divine rights of the kings. He was against these new isms that were, getting so prevalent in Europe, nationalism and, all that liberalism. So he was against those kind of isms. He wanted to protect the old absolute monarchy. He wanted to protect the divine rule of the kings. Along with Metternich, key people like the Frederick William II of Prussia, the Tsar Alexander of Russia, and Britain's foreign minister also were part of this Congress. So अगर हम देखें, so during the Napoleon Empire, if you see, this is how Europe was shaped. तो यहाँ पे आप देख पा रहे हो कि ये फ्रेंच टेरिटरी थी, ये सारी फ्रेंच की डिपेंडेंसी थी और ये सारे अलाइज थे. तो जो इंडिपेंडेंट स्टेट्स थे वो काफी कम बचे, राइट? सो बेसिकली कांग्रेस वीना कांग्रेस ने दैट्स हाउ द मैप वाज रीड्रॉन. तो अल्टीमेटली क्या किया वीना कांग्रेस ने? सबसे पहले तो उसका टास्क था सबसे पहला टास्क था टू रीड्रॉ द मैप और द पॉलिटिकल मैप ऑफ यूरोप दैट वाज चेंज्ड बाय नेपोलियन. सेकेंडली, द ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ कांग्रेस ऑफ वीना वाज कि टू आइसोलेट द फ्रांस बाय एस्टैब्लिशिंग अ रिंग ऑफ स्ट्रांग स्टेट्स अराउंड हर. कि भाई स्ट्रांग स्टेट्स अगर हमसे नेबर बना देंगे तो एटलीस्ट कोई नया नेपोलियन निकल के नहीं आ पाएगा फ्रांस से. बिकॉज एंड थर्डली, टू एलिमिनेट पॉलिटिकल थ्योरीज ऑफ फ्रांस. जो नई थ्योरीज इमर्ज हो रही थी, नेशनलिज्म की, लिबरलिज्म की, इंडिविजुअलिज्म की, राइट, पॉपुलर सोवरेनिटी की, ये सारी थ्योरीज को कर्ब किया जाए. फोर्थली, टू रिस्टोर द मोनार्कियल फोर्सेस इन वेरियस पार्ट्स ऑफ यूरोप. एंड लास्टली, टू एस्टैब्लिश बैलेंस ऑफ पॉलिटिकल पावर इन यूरोप, व्हिच मींस कि no country should be made very powerful so that it can dictate or it can dominate the other country. There should be a balance of power in Europe. These were the major objectives of the Congress of Vienna, and that's how they also decided. So these were the principles that were adopted at the Vienna Congress. The first was the principle of legitimacy. It said that rulers who were displaced by Napoleon, they will be restored back. So सबसे पहले फ्रांस में the grandson of Louis the 16 was still in on the crown. That was the Louis the 18. Similarly, there was the principle of compensation. Those people who had fought against Napoleon, those people who had defeated Napoleon, they will be rewarded, right? Thirdly, principle of balance of power will be established, which means that France will be, ultimately no single power should have strong power. So how they used to do it? सबसे पहले उन्होंने फ्रांस की बात करें तो फ्रांस की टेरिटरी वाज रिड्यूस्ड टू प्री 1792 फ्रांस. रेवोल्यूशन से पहले वाला जो फ्रांस था, जो उसकी टेरिटरी थी, इट वाज रिड्यूस्ड टू दैट, राइट? एंड फ्रांस वाज नॉट ह्यूमिलिएटेड एक्सेसिवली, क्योंकि ये पाया गया कि यार देखो, नाउ दैट वी हैव इंस्टिल्ड बैक लुई द 18 एंड इफ वी ह्यूमिलिएट फ्रांस मोर, इट विल लीड टू मोर एंटी और इट विल लीड टू मोर प्रो वॉर फीलिंग्स इन फ्रांस. तो उसको जो है कहीं ना कहीं कर्व करना था. प्लस फ्रांस वाज सराउंडेड बाय सम बफर स्टेट्स दैट वर न्यूट्रल. नीदरलैंड की बात करें तो नीदरलैंड वाज कंबाइंड विद बेल्जियम and kingdom of Netherlands was established. The idea was that कि अगर बेल्जियम और नीदरलैंड दोनों बहुत छोटे हैं, अगर दोनों एक ही किंगडम रहेंगे तो एटलीस्ट एक स्ट्रॉन्ग बफर स्टेट क्रिएट होगा नेबरिंग फ्रांस. जर्मनी की बात करें so Germany had Holy Roman Empire that existed which Napoleon abolished. So Vienna Congress decided that Holy Roman Empire will not be restored. Rather, तो पहले क्या था, जर्मनी 300 छोटे-छोटे किंगडम्स थे. नेपोलियन ने 39 किंगडम्स में उसको बांट दिया था और उसको नाम दिया था जर्मन कॉन्फेडरेशन का. So that German Confederation was formed and that was respected by Vienna Congress. जर्मनी में ऑस्ट्रिया का डोमिनेंट रोल एस्टैब्लिश किया गया. फिर इटली की बात करें तो इटली was divided into multiple states. ऑस्ट्रिया gained control over 2 provinces of Italy, Lombardy and Venetia, right? पोलैंड की बात करें तो पोलैंड की मैक्सिमम टेरिटरी जो है रशिया को दे दी गई because Russia played an important role in defeating of Napoleon. Prussia की बात करें, Prussia was made stronger because Prussia also played an important role in defeat of Napoleon, so it gained some territory in Rhineland and Westphalia. तो अगर हम बात करें वीना कांग्रेस की तो वीना कांग्रेस इंश्योर कि नेक्स्ट 40 इयर्स तक कोई वॉर नहीं हुआ यूरोप में. क्रिएटेड पीस. इट आल्सो इज एन एग्जांपल ऑफ डिप्लोमेसी, अ गुड डिप्लोमेसी. सो वो जो मॉडर्न डिप्लोमेसी हम आज आई है, कहीं ना कहीं उसका रूट जो है वो वीना कांग्रेस में है. फ्रांस वाज नॉट ह्यूमिलिएटेड एक्सेसिवली, तो फ्रांस में वो एक बहुत ज्यादा जो एक ह्यूमिलिएशन की भावना थी वो पैदा नहीं हुआ. ठीक है. Failure की बात करें तो it curbed the feelings that became dominant feelings of Europe, which was the feeling of nationalism, which was the feeling of democracy and liberalism. आपने उस feeling को artificially curb किया, but कब तक curb करोगे? एक टाइम पे वो feelings बाहर आई, and that led to the unification of Italy and Germany that we will study next. Similarly, 1830 1848 में revolutions भी हुए, small revolutions थे, but it happened because Vienna Congress rejected the important feelings that were there in the people of Europe. Now let's start with Italian unification. Very, very interesting, and I hope that you learn a lot of modern lessons from the Italian unification. Now we all know that during the ancient empire, we had the Roman Empire that existed. But in the 19th century, in the second half of 19th century, Italy was just a geographical expression, as Metternich had said. It was divided into small, small kingdoms, and those small kingdoms were dominated by different countries, mostly by Austria. So if you see this map of Italy, so you have this part that is called and this part, Piedmont was technically ruled by a native Italian ruler, and he also had control over Sardinia, that was an island south of Corsica. इसके अलावा Lombardy and Venetia, two other parts of Italy, they were ruled by Austria. Then you had the middle duchies, which were Modena, Tuscany, and Parma, and they were dominated by Austria. They were not directly ruled by Austria, but they were ruled by puppets of Austria. Right, the rulers were the puppets of Austria. Then you had these papal states. These papal states were ruled by the Pope, right? And then you had these southern states of Sicily and Naples. Sicily and Naples, they were ruled by Bourbon monarchs. Bourbon was the same dynasty that was ruling in France, Louis the 16th and Louis the 18th. So that's how Italy was divided in the second half of the 19th century. So technically, in the whole Italy, you had only one strong native state, that was the Piedmont and Sardinia. इसके अलावा most of the states were either under foreign rule or they were ruled by weak and dependent rulers. ठीक है, अब अगर हम बात करें इटली की बिफोर द यूनिफिकेशन, सो लेट्स Sardinia and Piedmont was ruled by native Italian king and native Italian prince, right? So Piedmont and Sardinia was ruled by the local people, not by any other people. ऑस्ट्रिया का डोमिनेशन था वेनेशिया में और ऑस्ट्रिया का डोमिनेशन था लॉम्बार्डी में, ठीक है. अब लेट्स सी द सिचुएशन ऑफ इटली बिफोर द यूनिफिकेशन. तो एज आई हैव टोल्ड यू दैट देयर वाज एक्सट्रीम फॉरेन डोमिनेशन. इटली की अगर हम बात करें तो ऑस्ट्रिया, जो आज एक छोटी सी कंट्री है, इट यूज्ड टू बी अ डोमिनेंट पावर इन इटली. तो जो मैंने कहा कि जो नॉर्थ इटली था वहां पे उसका डायरेक्ट रूल था, और कोई भी अगर देयर वाज एनी काइंड ऑफ मूवमेंट दैट यूज्ड टू हैपन इन इटली, ऑस्ट्रिया यूज्ड टू सप्रेस इट विद ब्रूटल माइट. सो टेक्निकली इटली, especially the northern Italy, became the satellite region of Austria. Third situation of Italy before unification was that there was absence of national unity. आप पीपीटी से इसको पढ़ सकते हो, टेंशन मत लो. There was absence of national unity in Italy. ठीक है? It means कि Italy was, as I told you, a geographical expression. But Italy के जो लोग थे, वो अपने आप को identify करते थे with region, with city, with dynasty. There was no common political loyalty, and for a longer period of time, there was no political loyalty that remained in Italy. जैसे इंडिया के केस में आप देखो तो इंडिया के केस में हमेशा एक स्ट्रॉन्ग सेंट्रल पावर रहा है शुरू से, बट इटली के केस में छोटे छोटे किंगडम्स थे. सो दे डिड नॉट एंजॉय, और फॉर अ लॉन्गर पीरियड ऑफ टाइम दे डिड नॉट सॉ एनी काइंड ऑफ पॉलिटिकल यूनिटी among themselves. They were more loyal to their cities or dynasty than to a nation itself. Fourthly, there was economic backwardness and regional imbalance. तो मोस्टली अगर हम बात करें इटली की, इटली में इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन नहीं आया था. इटली में जो नॉर्थ था वो थोड़ा बहुत इंडस्ट्रीज आई थी और ट्रेड था, बट जो साउथ इटली था, सदर्न इटली था, वो कहीं ना कहीं एग्रीकल्चर बेस्ड था और बैकवर्ड था. मोस्टली एग्रीकल्चर का डोमिनेशन था. एग्रीकल्चर डोमिनेशन में भी फ्यूडल सिस्टम, जो कि बहुत सारी कंट्रीज से अबॉलिश हो चुका था यूरोप की, इट कंटिन्यूड टू बी देयर इन इटली. ठीक है. सिमिलरली there was role of these papal states. Papal states were states that were ruled by the Pope. A Pope जो था, he was against any kind of unification of Italy because he felt that if the feeling of nationalism and liberalism will be there in Italy, then it will be a threat to the papal state and he will lose his temporal power. Right? So therefore, papal states were major obstacles and opposition to any kind of unification of Italy. Sixth is there was separation of liberal and nationalist ideas. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि इटली में लोगों ने कोशिश नहीं करी थी उससे पहले. कार्बनरी करके एक सीक्रेट सोसाइटी थी, राइट? कार्बनरी का मतलब था कोल माइनर्स, एंड दिस सीक्रेट सोसाइटी दे यूज्ड टू मीट एंड दे यूज्ड टू स्प्रेड द फीलिंग्स ऑफ इटालियन नेशनलिज्म, बट इट वाज अ सीक्रेट सोसाइटी. बट ऑस्ट्रिया का बहुत डायरेक्ट कंट्रोल था, और ऑस्ट्रिया की जो सीक्रेट पुलिस थी, दे यूज्ड टू डू वेरी सीवियर मिलिट्री रिप्रेशन इफ एंड व्हेन दे यूज्ड टू फाइंड दीस सीक्रेट रेवोल्यूशनरीज. एंड फाइनली there was cultural unity without political unity. Cultural unity थी, reason being कि language same थी, language Italian थी. Secondly, history same थी. जो Roman Empire था, every Italian from north to south, they used to talk about the Roman Empire with pride. And thirdly, they had literature, Machiavelli, Dante, all of them were popular throughout the Italy. But political unity, nahi. Okay? So now let's understand the phase-wise integration of Italy, phase-wise unification of Italy. तो इटली को समझने के लिए जरूरी है कि हम चार लोगों को और तीन लोगों को समझें, जिसमें सबसे पहले द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फिगर वुड बी दिस पर्सन, Mazzini. Mazzini is also called as the father of Italian nationalism. He was the person who actually, through his writings and through his intellectual works, he created this kind of environment that Italy has to be independent. Italy has to free itself from monarchical rule. Italy has to free itself from foreign powers. And Italy has to transform itself into a democratic, secular republic. So he was the founding father of modern Italian nationalism. And he started a society called Young Italy. And in that Young Italy, he used to, propagate his ideas through pamphlets and through meetings and through speeches. He used to propagate the idea of Italian nationalism and Italian unification. But the problem with Mazzini was that his ideas, he was a very intellectual person, but he was not a leader in that sense. He did not have, he was not really supported by a lot of masses. Secondly, he did not have an army. And thirdly, he was not backed by any kind of foreign power. So despite all his intellectual achievements, he did spread the idea of Italian unification. But on ground, he was not able to achieve his goal of Italian unification because ultimately he was not backed by any strong power. So the first phase of Italian, unification was the ideological phase, which was between 1815 to 1848. In this ideological phase, दो लोग थे सबसे important, as I told you, Carbonari and Mazzini. Both of them spreaded the idea of Italian unification, Italian nationalism. Okay? So these two societies helped in organizing revolts in 1820 in Naples and 1830 in Central Italy. But all these reforms were suppressed by Austria, right? So they failed because, as I told you, they did not have mass support. Austria was dominant and they did not have any kind of diplomatic value. Let's move to the second phase, which we call as the phase of liberal constitutional phase. तो second phase जो 1848 से 1849 तक रहा, इस phase में क्या हुआ कि 1848 में revolution spread across various parts of Europe and the revolutionaries were demanding liberalism and democracy. The same feeling of revolution was also invoked in Italy, and there were revolts that took place in Lombardy, Venetia, and Rome. And because the revolts were happening in these areas, Charles Albert, who was the king of Piedmont, Sardinia, as I told you, Piedmont, Sardinia was the only strong native state in Italy. And it felt that we have to take the responsibility of uniting Italy, because other than us, all the states are either very small or they are dominated or under the influence or controlled by the foreign power. So Charles Albert of Piedmont, Sardinia thought that because of this revolution, Austria will be weak. So he launched a war on Austria. But unfortunately, in that war, he was defeated at Custoza, and he was forced by Austria to actually, ultimately frame a constitution that provides for absolute monarchy. But Charles Albert refused, and he continued with liberal constitution, where there was proper constitutional rights that were provided to the people. Right? This was the second phase of Italian unification. Now we come to the third and the most important phase. After the defeat of Piedmont, Sardinia in the second phase, it was realized by Piedmont and Sardinia that Austria is the main obstacle. जब भी कोई effort किए जाएंगे इटली को unify करने के लिए, Austria will always interfere and prevent any kind of unification. तो उसके लिए जरूरी है diplomacy and war. And Piedmont and Sardinia realized this thing कि सिर्फ war से वो जीत नहीं पाएंगे, because अकेले they are too small to defeat Austria. So therefore they need allies and they need diplomacy. Second important lesson that they have realized after the second phase was that popular revolts alone are insufficient. Revolt होंगे, Austria उसको suppress कर देगी. There is a need for a strong state. We have to create a strong state also which can defeat Austria. And thirdly, republic is not possible. Monarchy can be the only unifying force. So based on these three lessons, Piedmont and Sardinia started working. And that's how we come to the third phase, which we call as the Cavour phase, or the phase of diplomacy. So Count Cavour, he became the prime minister of Piedmont, Sardinia in 1852. And he believed that in order to unify Italy, we have to make Piedmont and Sardinia as a model state. We have to make a strong state, plus we have to modernize, Piedmont and Sardinia. So technically, and secondly, he also believed that we need to isolate Austria diplomatically. क्योंकि अगर ऑस्ट्रिया को डिप्लोमेटिकली आइसोलेट हमने कर दिया, then perhaps we can fulfill the idea of unifying Italy. ठीक है? So what he did after that, he took number of steps to modernize the economy and the army of Piedmont and Sardinia. And secondly, to diplomatically isolate Austria, he took a number of steps. The first step was that he participated in the Crimean War. अब ये Crimean War क्या था? तो Crimean War बेसिकली ये था कि रशिया जो थी, अब आप देखोगे तो बहुत सारे कंट्रीज थी ईस्टर्न यूरोप की that were under the rule of Ottomans. Ottomans were technically mostly Turkish people who were Muslims by religion. On the other hand, many of its territories that it was ruling, especially Eastern Europe, they were Christian in nature, and they were not just Christian, they were Slavic Christians in nature. So their race was Slavs. Russia जो था, Russians also considered themselves as Slavs, right? So basically, Russia attacked Ottoman because Ottoman at that time had already become weak also. It was called as the sick man of Europe. तो रशिया ने ये एक्सक्यूज दिया कि जो क्रिश्चियन सब्जेक्ट्स हैं ऑटोमन एम्पायर में, दे आर बीइंग ट्रीटेड अनफेयरली बाय ऑटोमन्स. अब जब रशिया ने अटैक किया ऑटोमन्स पे, तो ऑटोमन्स के अलाई बने फ्रांस और इंग्लैंड. रीजन बीइंग दैट फ्रेंच एंड इंग्लैंड थॉट कि इफ रशिया विल विन दिस वॉर, इट विल बिकम टू पावरफुल, सो इट्स बेटर टू स्टॉप रशिया. सो दे केम ऑन द साइड ऑफ ऑटोमन्स, एंड काउंट कैवर thought that if we actually take the side of France and Russia, who will actually win the war, at least our small state will give that, or our small state will get that respect, in that conference that will take place after the war. So basically, Count Caver decided to participate in the Crimean War on the behalf or as an ally of France, England, and Ottomans. Finally, Ottomans won the war. Russia was defeated, and there was a Paris conference that was organized next year. In that Paris conference, Count Caver brought the issue of Italy. That ultimately Italy has been subjugated and dominated by Austria. Its aim of self-rule is being denied by Austria. So he brought the Italy question to this European conference. तो इससे क्या हुआ कि जो यूरोप की और पावर्स थी, they also started sympathizing with the Italian cause. ठीक है ना? Plus in this Crimean War, Austria was neutral. So Austria was kind of backed by both the sides for being neutral, right? And through this Paris conference, Caver tried to become ally of England and France. So after this Paris conference, where the question of Italy was raised, he did the next important thing. He signed an alliance pact with France, right? And that treaty was called as Treaty of Plombiers. Under the Treaty of Plombiers, it was said that if Sardinia is attacked by, if Austria is attacked by Sardinia, France would help them, and in return, France will get nice and serve. So that was the Treaty of Plombiers. So ultimately, Caver made France as its ally. Okay? So that's how he started this diplomatic war. अब क्या हुआ कि after he felt that he has enough allies in Europe, and he felt that his state has become modern, its army has become modern, his economy has become modern, he attacked Austria in 1859. And in the Battle of Magenta and Solferino, Austria was defeated. And after the defeat, Austria lost Lombardy, and Piedmont and Sardinia got control of Lombardy. Right? After was merged with Piedmont, जो आपकी सेंट्रल इटली में डचीज थी, they also voted to join the Piedmont Sardinia. तो जो नॉर्दर्न इटली था, पूरा नॉर्दर्न इटली came under the control of Piedmont and Sardinia. Let's look into the map again to understand it better. See this. So if you see the map, in this war, what happened? In this war, Lombardy was ceded by Austria to Piedmont and Sardinia. ठीक है? फिर जो आपके नॉर्थ सेंट्रल डचीज थी, these central duchies also voted that they want to join Piedmont Sardinia, and that's how they also were merged in Piedmont and Sardinia. So ultimately, if you see, almost all of North Italy came under the control of Piedmont Sardinia. ठीक है? अब क्या बचा? अब बचा पापल स्टेट्स, और यहाँ बचा वेनेशिया और सदर्न स्टेट्स. So basically, there was a third magical person in this Italian unification, and his name was Garibaldi. Garibaldi was a patriot and a firm believer of republicanism. So he was against monarchy. He was against, any kind of, anarchy. He was firm believer in democracy. He was firm believer in equality. Garibaldi, launched a campaign. He launched the campaign rulers of Sicily and Naples, and through that military campaign, he defeated those rulers and he captured Naples and also Sicily. Now, basically, once you get access over territory, you don't leave it, right? Because ultimately almost half of Italy was under his control. But he was a firm nationalist, firm patriot, and firm believer that this is an opportunity of Italian unification, and I will not lose it. So despite being a firm Republican, he actually gave his territory to Piedmont Sardinia. कि भाई मैंने ये जीत ली है, अभी आप इसका रूल करो. So that पूरा इटली एक पॉलिटिकल पावर के अंदर यूनाइटेड था. So तो kind of sacrifice. And then he retired. He retired after the war, and he spent his last days, in an island. So somebody who controlled half of Italy just for the sake of nationalism, he gave his territory to the ruler of Piedmont and Sardinia. So that's how almost 90% Italy was united, right? And only two areas were there that was missing, which was Papal States and Venetia. Okay? This was the photo of Garibaldi. ठीक है? अब उसके बाद क्या हुआ कि 1861 में Kingdom of Italy was proclaimed. So that's how we move to the fifth phase. So ultimately, the king or Victor Emmanuel II, who was the ruler of Piedmont, Sardinia, now became the king of Italy. And initially his capital was at Turin because Rome was under the Papal State. He was united now, except the two areas, Rome and Venetia. Finally, what happened was in the sixth phase, final unification happened. So 1866 में क्या हुआ कि ऑस्ट्रिया और प्रशिया के बीच वॉर हुआ, right? And in that war, Austria allied with Prussia, right? And Prussia defeated Austria. So in response, Austria had to move away from. तो पूरा आपका नॉर्थ जो था, that came under the control of Piedmont and Sardinia, or I would say now Italy, right? Finally, 1870 में क्या हुआ कि जो Papal states थे, that was under the rule of Pope, उनकी सिक्योरिटी जो थी, that was guaranteed by the French army, और French army वहां पे रहती थी to protect them. So nothing could happen to them. But 1870 में क्या हुआ कि प्रशिया और फ्रांस के बीच वॉर हुआ, right? That we will also discuss in the next part. और because of that war, फ्रांस की हालत बहुत पतली थी. तो जो फ्रेंच सोल्जर्स थे रोम में, that were guarding the Papal states, they had to go to the front to fight the war. So when that area was free from French soldiers, Italian army moved there, and it had also integrated the Papal states within the Italian Empire. Okay? So ultimately, Rome became the capital of Italy in 1871. That's how the unification of Italy was done, through a mix of diplomacy, through a mix of nationalism, through a mix of real politics, and through a mix of lot of courage and lot of sacrifice for people like Garibaldi, despite giving it all to the king. So that's why the story of Italian unification is so inspiring. Now, what was the impact of Italian unification? Let's understand that. So सबसे पहले हम बात करते हैं political impact की. So as I told you that for a longer period of time, Italy was more of a geographical expression. It was not a country. So it was dominated by sometimes Austria, sometimes Prussia, sometimes French. Finally, it ended the centuries of humiliation and fragmentation, and it created a constitutional monarchy in Italy under Victor Emmanuel II. Similarly, it impacted other people because now that Italy was united, it also did German unification and also Balkan unification. Plus, it had weakened the position of Austria in Europe. Then, if we talk about economic impact, so it after the unification, it gave birth to industrialization or industrial revolution in Italy, because finally Italy was under one political unit, one economic unit. So there was unified currency, there was unified taxation, and therefore and there was unified transportation. So northern areas became industrialized, but southern areas remained backward. So this created a long-term economic disparity between the northern part and the southern part of Italy. And finally, the social impact. So it also, fostered national unity, through common language, through common education. But it also triggered urbanization, right? And also led to class struggle among the people. Then if we talk about the cultural and religious impact, so the authority of Pope was reduced. Italy became more secular in its approach, right? If we talk about international impact, it shifted the European balance of power. Austria's power was diminished. The feelings of nationalism, liberalism became more prominent across Europe. And if we talk about the long-term consequences, because the gap remained between the north and the south. Similarly, because जो एक political unity थी वो इतनी stable नहीं रही, so it finally led to the rise of fascism and Mussolini in 1930s that we will study in the fourth or I think fifth lecture. Now let's come to the last topic of the day, which is unification of Germany. This again is a very, very important and interesting part of our modern world history, because Germany, if we see, is not just powerful today. Germany was also responsible for World War I, World War II, and at this moment, the German Chancellor is in India. So it's a good time to study about the history of Germany. So if we talk about Germany, Germany was also just like Italy, but the only difference was that Italy was at least divided into 7, 8, 9 states. Germany was divided into 300 states, 300 small states, right? And when Napoleon entered Germany, he actually merged those 300 states into 39 states. And the Vienna Congress, the only good thing the Vienna Congress did was, the Vienna Congress continued with that Napoleon arrangement, and the 39 states का confederation बना था, it accepted that, right? So before 1864, Germany was technically a loose confederation of 39 states, and among those 39 states, only one state that was more powerful, and that state was Prussia. जैसे जर्मनी में Piedmont and Sardinia was the most powerful state, यहाँ पे this state of Prussia was the most prominent state. right? Because Prussia was modern, it was powerful also. ठीक है? इसके अलावा बाकी दो states थे, most of them or most of those states were smaller states. Saxony वगैरह थे, but Saxony थे, Bavaria थे, but they were small states. Mostly जो था, it was Prussia that was a powerful state. अब यहाँ पे क्या situation थी? यहाँ पे भी वही situation थी जो इटली में थी. Austria was dominating the German Confederation. Austria was the dominant power, और maximum those states थे, they were under the influence of Austria, except one state that was Prussia. Prussia remained more or less independent and autonomous. तो दो लोग जिन्होंने जर्मनी को यूनिफाई किया, उसमें सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट वाज दिस पर्सन हु वाज द ऑटोमन बिस्मार्क और द आयरन मैन ऑफ जर्मनी, राइट? ही इज द पर्सन हु वाज रिस्पांसिबल फॉर द यूनिफिकेशन ऑफ जर्मनी. So if you talk about Germany before unification, first of all there was political fragmentation, which means that Germany, as I told you, was consisted of 300 states, जिसको 39 states में divide किया गया था. And even though there was a German confederation, but the confederation did not have a common army, it did not have a unified foreign policy, it did not have a unified currency, and there was no central government per se. ठीक है? Secondly, if we talk about the second aspect of Germany before the unification was that Austria had dominated Germany, and Austria or its famous prime minister Metternich aimed to preserve monarchy and suppress any kind of feelings of nationalism and liberalism in 39 German states, right? And therefore he had issued this what we call as Karlsbad decrees. Under the Karlsbad decrees, it was said or it was proclaimed that there will be a censorship of press in states of Germany. Austria government will control the nationalistic feelings in universities, and there will be a ban on student nationalist societies. So through various instruments, Austria was keeping its control over the 39 German states. Third was economic disunity and internal barriers. So these states had their own economic policy, their own currency, their own custom duties, and they also had different taxes. So and they also had internal tariffs. So because of that, their economy and their growth remained weak. Agriculture remained dominant and industry remained weak because internally इतने सारे barriers थे. और बाकी states छोटे states cannot expect that you will grow very high economically if you are not technically trade or doing trade with each other. Fourth was that Russia or rise of Prussia as a potential leader. So basically, among all the 39 states of Germany, only Prussia had a strong army. Prussia had a territorial continuity. Well, it had at least a large empire, and thirdly, it had an efficient bureaucracy and a powerful king. Right? And after the defeat of Napoleon, Prussia also modernized itself. So it abolished serfdom. It also, brought new modernization. It also, started initial phase of industrialization. So it was Prussia who actually became leader of Zollverein, and we will discuss about Zollverein in the phases of integration. So if we talk about the key personalities and leadership, as I told you, the first person was King Wilhelm. King Wilhelm he was a firm believer of divine rights of monarch, and he was a firm believer of centralized power and strong monarchy. He provided that backing, that ultimately that military backing and the other kind of backing to Bismarck when Bismarck was engaged in the work of unification of Germany. Second was Ottoman Bismarck, the leading person who became the Chancellor of Prussia in 1862. And Bismarck believed in the policy of realism or real politics. He was a very firm supporter of strong monarchy, and he was a firm believer. He was a firm believer of realism, which means कि end justifies the means. आप end जो है उसके लिए कोई भी means use किया हो वो justified अगर end result आपके favor में. So he was not a firm believer of those moral ideas or those ethical ideas. Blood and iron policy, yes, Siddharth, right? And ultimately, Bismarck had believed that it is the Germany who had to merge in Prussia rather than Prussia merging into Germany. He wanted the unification of Germany, but he did not wanted the unification of Germany under the influence of liberal ideas or liberal revolutionaries. Rather, he wanted the unification of Germany under the Prussian leadership and without the influence of any kind of liberal ideas of revolutionaries, right? Because he was a firm believer in the divine right of the kings, and he was also a nationalist. But before that, he was a Prussian nationalist. He was first a Prussian and then a German. So Bismarck used the combination of diplomacy, combination of alliances and war to actually, unite the German Republic. So let's now discuss the phase-wise unification of Germany. So सबसे पहला phase था economic unification through Zollverein. Zollverein was a custom union, right, led by Prussia. And basically the idea was, 39 states थे. They realized that if we will have internal tariffs, then all of us will suffer economically. So it's better that we all speak German and we have same ethnicity. So let's create a custom union. So 39 states created a custom union called as Zollverein. So, and under the Zollverein, they removed any kind of internal tariffs. So this resulted in economic integration of various states. And in this Zollverein, Austria was excluded from it. So it was completely the internal economic unification of German states. So this economic integration led to increase in trade, increase in industry. It also strengthened the middle class and it created what we call as economic unity before the political unity can be achieved later. Second phase was the failure of liberal revolution, 1848 to 1849. तो बेसिकली क्या हुआ 1848 में रिवॉल्ट हुआ अक्रॉस यूरोप फ्रांस में हुआ इटली में हुआ वो जर्मनी में हुआ राइट एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दिस रिवॉल्ट फ्रैंकफर्ट में वेरियस स्टेट्स के रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स आए एंड फ्रैंकफर्ट पार्लियामेंट वाज कन्वीन्ड राइट एंड इन दैट फ्रैंकफर्ट पार्लियामेंट जर्मन क्राउन जो था वो किंग ऑफ रशिया फ्रेडरिक विलियम को दिया गया राइट दैट यू बिकम द किंग ऑफ जर्मनी द होल जर्मनी बट ही रिफ्यूज्ड इट बाय कॉलिंग इट द क्राउन 5 minutes, it take 5-7 minutes. Okay? Now, how can you expect me to stop when almost 60% of this topic is over, right? Let me at least finish it. If you don't want to watch, you can leave. You know? So ultimately, what happened was that king rejected, the crown by calling it as crown from the gutter. इसका क्या मतलब है? Basically, as I told you that King William IV was a firm believer of divine right. He was a firm believer of divine rights of the kings. So he said, यार ये आम लोग इकट्ठा हुए हैं पार्लियामेंट में और ये मुझे ऑफर करेंगे क्राउन. This is my divine right. I will not get the crown from people who are commoners. Right? So that is why he used crown from the gutter. ये लोग जो गटर के लोग हैं, they will give me the crown. Who are they? Right? This was the first reason why he rejected. Secondly, जो पार्लियामेंट हुआ था, जो पार्लियामेंट कन्वीन हुआ था फ्रैंकफर्ट में, they proposed a more of a liberal constitutional monarchy. Where the king will have very limited power. He will be a liberal constitutional monarch. And as I told you, William IV believed in strong monarchy and centralization. Thirdly, he rejected the crown because he felt that it will alienate other German kings who will feel why only him, why we were not offered the crown. So it can create an internal disunity among the German kingdoms. And fourthly, he thought that if he will accept the crown, it will automatically lead to attack from Austria because Austria will not allow, because Austria had dominated that region. So Austria will not allow Prussia taking this leadership. So that's why 1848 में King of Prussia, Frederick William IV, refused to take the crown. And therefore, it was very clear that unification will not come through liberal parliamentary methods. Unification will only come with war and diplomacy. Okay? So that's how we come to the third phase, or the fourth phase, which is Bismarck and the real politics. So basically what Bismarck did was that Bismarck believed that they have to make Prussia just like what Cavour did. I have to make Prussia a strong state if I have to defeat Austria, right? So basically Bismarck followed the policy of blood and iron. He strengthened the Prussian army and he also modernized the. Similarly, what he did was that he started with the series of war. The first war that he fought was Danish War. अब Danish War कहाँ हुआ था? Danish War was fought in the region called as Holstein and Schleswig. अब ये जो दो रीजन्स थे, ये आप देख रहे हो जर्मनी और डेनमार्क के बीच में थे. और यहाँ पे पॉपुलेशन वाज मिक्स्ड. हाफ ऑफ देम वर डेन्स, हाफ ऑफ देम वर जर्मन्स, राइट? तो अल्टीमेटली क्या हुआ कि ऑस्ट्रिया और रशिया दोनों ने अलायंस बनाया एंड दे फॉट अगेंस्ट द डैनिश आर्मी. इन दैट वॉर द डैनिश आर्मी वाज defeated and both Austria and Prussia divided this area into half. So Schleswig came to Prussia and Holstein remained with Germany, right? So Holstein remained with Austria and Schleswig came to Prussia. That was the outcome of the Danish War. ठीक है? अब प्रॉब्लम क्या हुआ कि Bismarck जो था, he had already modernized his army and he was waiting for an opportunity to fight a war against Austria. And basically he got the opportunity when he alleged that Austria has no reason to have control over Holstein because Holstein's population is German, and since the population is German, Prussia should have control over the Holstein. So on the issue of Holstein, he launched the war against Austria. In that war, what was called as the Battle of Sadowa, Austria was clearly defeated. Prussia won the war decisively, and after Austria was defeated, there were a number of consequences that happened. Firstly, जो 39 states का German Confederation था, that was dissolved. जो North Indian states थे, they had actually decided that they want to join Prussia. So the North Indian states joined Prussia. Austria was excluded from German affairs. It was decided that now Austria will no longer interfere in the affairs of 39 German states. Later on to that was dissolved also. And Prussia annexed new areas of Hesse, Hanover, Frankfurt and Schleswig-Holstein. तो टेक्निकली पूरा नॉर्थ जर्मनी जो था दैट केम अंडर द कंट्रोल ऑफ रशिया अंडर बिस्मार्क. ठीक है. अब साउथ जर्मनी था, साउथ जर्मनी रिमेन्ड फ्री बट इट बिकेम द मिलिट्री अलाय ऑफ रशिया. ठीक है. तो नेक्स्ट टू द नेक्स्ट फेज व्हिच इज यूनिफिकेशन ऑफ नॉर्थ जर्मनी. एज आई टोल्ड यू, ये आपका हो गया. सो नॉर्थ जर्मन कॉन्फेडरेशन वाज एस्टैब्लिश्ड and Prussian king became its president and Bismarck became its chancellor. Now let's come to the eighth phase which is the Franco-Prussian war. तो अब क्या हुआ कि फ्रांस और जर्मनी और व्हाट वी कॉल एज रशिया जो अब काफी पावरफुल हो गया था बिकॉज अब उसके पास ऑलमोस्ट हाफ ऑफ जर्मनी का वो रूलर. एंड ऑटोमन्स और सॉरी बिस्मार्क बिलीव दैट अ वॉर विद फ्रेंच इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू रेज द नेशनलिस्ट फीलिंग्स इन साउथ ऑफ जर्मनी बिकॉज साउथ ऑफ जर्मनी अभी भी बाहर था. दे वर मिलिट्री अलायंस ऑफ जर्मनी बट दे वर स्टिल इंडिपेंडेंट. तो बेसिकली क्या हुआ कि स्पेनिश क्राउन की बात आई कि कौन बनेगा स्पेन का नया किंग. और बेसिकली इट वाज सेड दैट द क्राउन वाज ऑफर्ड टू अ रिलेटिव ऑफ द प्रशियन किंग. ठीक है. अब उस समय फ्रांस वाज अंडर द रूल ऑफ Napoleon III. Napoleon III was relative of Napoleon and he wanted to achieve great heights like his grandfather, right? So Napoleon III ने रशिया को धमकाया कि भाई देखो ऐसे आप नहीं कर सकते हो क्योंकि he believed that if the relative of Prussian king will sit on the throne of Spain then France will be surrounded from hosts. So therefore he sent this message to a diplomat to the Prussian king कि भाई France will not tolerate any such measure. France will not tolerate the crown being given to the relative of Prussian king, right? So diplomat had conveyed that message to him. Now the Prussian king accepted and said कि ठीक है, as said by the French king, I will do the same. I will ensure कि भाई the throne will not be given to the or the throne of Spain will not be given to my relative. ठीक है. तो अल्टीमेटली क्या हुआ कि ये टेलीग्राम, इस मीटिंग का टेलीग्राम किंग ने भिजवाया. तो किंग वाज इन ईएमएस व्हिच वाज अ स्पा टाउन इन जर्मनी. तो उस टेलीग्राम को किंग ने भिजवाया लेकिन बिस्मार्क ने क्या किया कि उस टेलीग्राम को मैनिपुलेट कर दिया. तो जो किंग ने कहा था कि ठीक है मैं मान रहा हूं, उस टेलीग्राम को मैनिपुलेट करके ऐसा मैसेज गया कि किंग स्ट्रांगली रिफ्यूज द फ्रेंच डिमांड कि द थ्रोन विल नॉट बी गिवन टू हिज रिलेटिव्स. उसको कुछ इस तरीके से उसने मैनिपुलेट किया एंड देन दैट टेलीग्राम इज रिलीज टू द मीडिया एंड टू द पब्लिक. इससे क्या हुआ कि फ्रांस में लोगों ने बड़ा ह्यूमिलिएशन महसूस किया. ठीक है ना. और फ्रांस के लोगों ने कहा कि यार ये तो हमारे किंग की बेइज्जती करी गई है तो अब इसके बिहाफ में हमें बदला लेना है. और दैट इज व्हाट बिस्मार्क आल्सो वांटेड टू डू बिकॉज़ बिस्मार्क वांटेड द फ्रेंच टू अटैक जर्मनी. फिर उससे क्या होगा कि जो साउथ जर्मनी है नेशनलिस्टिक फीलिंग्स आ जाएंगी एंड दे विल आल्सो जॉइन द नॉर्थ जर्मनी, राइट? सो बिकॉज़ ऑफ दिस मैनिपुलेटिंग ऑफ telegram it increased the nationalist feelings and pro-war feelings in France and based on those feelings France attacked Prussia in 1870 and the Franco-Prussian war started, right? All the German states north south united against the French invasion and finally the French were defeated in the Battle of Sedan. Paris was also captured by the United Germany. Napoleon the king was also captured and finally the southern German states also joined the northern German states and the Germany as we see in the modern day was born. So after this merger 1871 में King William the One was crowned as Kaiser in Versailles. As you know Versailles क्या था? Versailles was the place जो French emperor की place थी. तो Versailles में he was crowned as the Kaiser or the Emperor of Germany and Bismarck became the first chancellor of German Empire. ठीक है. Now what was the impact of German unification? अब इस compared to Italy जहां पे unification का इतना ज्यादा नहीं हुआ. Reason being even after the unification Italy remained weak, but that was not the case with Germany. Germany after the unification became very powerful. Because it became very powerful, there were conflicts and there was World War I and World War II. So the root cause of World War I and World War II was or it lies to the unification of Germany because it disturbed the balance of power in Germany. Germany became super powerful in next 15 years. So first of all, if we talk about the political impact, there was emergence of new power. There was emergence of new German Empire. Secondly, after the unification, there was end of Austrian dominance. Austria, which was dominating Italy and Germany, after the defeat, Austria became, what we call as middle power. Its status as a major power declined, right? Similarly, Berlin became the new diplomatic capital of Europe. जो conferences होती थी या जो important, for example, Scramble for Africa, जो conference हुई थी, जो हम आगे क्लास में डिस्कस करेंगे, वो सब बर्लिन में होने लगे. Secondly, if we talk about economic impact, that led to rapid industrialization of Germany. जर्मनी में क्योंकि जर्मनी के पास भी बहुत रिसोर्सेज थे, रूअर वैली थी, ज़ोल्वरिन से इकोनॉमिक यूनिटी हो रखी थी, तो बाय 1913 जर्मनी हैड सरपास्ड ब्रिटेन इन स्टील प्रोडक्शन. सोशल इंपैक्ट की बात करें तो इट लेड टू राइज ऑफ नेशनल यूनिटी, इट लेड टू राइज ऑफ जर्मन नेशनलिज्म एंड बिकॉज ऑफ इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन, बिकॉज ऑफ मॉडर्न इंडस्ट्रीज, इट आल्सो रिजल्टेड इन राइज ऑफ सोशलिज्म इन जर्मनी दैट वी विल डिस्कस टुमारो. देन अगर हम बात करें कल्चरल और आइडियोलॉजिकल लेवल पे, तो जो चर्च था, चर्च की पावर वाज रिड्यूस्ड, सेक्युलरिज्म गेन मोर प्रोमिनेंस, and there was more cultural unity. So German literature, German ancient texts, German language and German identity was promoted. Then if we talk about the international impact, so in the international impact we see that ultimately जो एक balance of power बनाया गया था वेना कांग्रेस के बाद, that balance of power was broken and Germany became super powerful, which resulted also in arms race and imperial rivalry. Germany जो नया नया power उभरा था, it also demanded कि भाई हमारी colonies कहाँ हैं, आप लोग ने जो बांट लिया है फ्रांस और ब्रिटेन ने, so that's why that started a new arms race. It also started imperial rivalry among the nations, and finally it led to foundation of modern German state, and it led to the seed of future conflict, which is World War I and World War II. So this is the story of German unification. So Italian unification was based on more diplomacy and peace and more liberal ideas. German unification was based on militant nationalism, and it was based on what we call as more wars. Okay? So yes, Bhavna, we will do upload. If you have any doubts, please let me know. Otherwise, let's meet tomorrow. Tomorrow we will be discussing. Yes, German unification is important for this year mains because German chancellor has also visited us, right? So it's important for the mains. It's very because अभी तक पूछा भी नहीं गया, right? So tomorrow we will be discussing industrial revolution and the birth of colonialism and imperialism, right? So see you guys tomorrow. I hope, and thank you for the patience. I know history can be boring sometimes, but I thank you for your patience, and let's meet tomorrow at 1:30 again. Thank you. How to use PPT and notes. So basically PPT जो चीजें notes में नहीं है PPT में, include that in your notes. PPT में क्या है कि I have see the idea of PPT is that एक organized way में चीजें रहे from one to another. So whatever is missing in the notes go through the PPT. इसके अलावा I think notes are enough. Shivani, if you are studying world history for the first time, I would say that, and if you are very basic and if you have time, you can go through the जो NCERT वाली वर्ड हिस्ट्री है उसको आप या फिर मैकमिलन की बेसिक्स ऑफ वर्ड हिस्ट्री भी आप गो कर सकते हो, ठीक है ना। भावना फर्दर शॉर्ट नोट्स की अभी जरूरत नहीं है, इट्स बेटर यू कैन रिफर टू दीस नोट्स, ठीक है। सी यू गाइस टुमारो, थैंक यू।